Our life is like a zebra. White stripes are followed by black ones, triumphs are followed by failures. Failures in rocket engineering turn out to be especially epic. Each unsuccessful launch brings losses of tens of millions of dollars to a government or a private company, and sometimes even results in the deaths of astronauts. In this compilation, you'll see failed rocket launches, both space and ballistic. Stay tuned, it's going to be interesting. Test of the 3-engine modification of Falcon 9 in Texas in August 2014. The cause of the disaster was a malfunction in one of the engines. The rocket failed to reach the cruising speed needed to exit Earth's atmosphere, lost its trajectory, and detonated. A commercial launch from Cape Canaveral as part of a resupply mission to the International Space Station in June of 2015. A few minutes after launch, the Falcon 9 rocket began to break apart mid-air. The Dragon cargo spacecraft and over 2 tons of payload were lost, including a prototype of a fundamentally new spacesuit for spacewalks. In 2018, Falcon 9 completed over 20 flights, and only one turned out to be less than successful. After delivering the Dragon cargo ship to the ISS during landing, the first stage lost control due to hydraulic issues and missed the landing platform. The incident ended without loss for SpaceX. The rocket landed sideways in the sea and was later recovered with the help of several tugboats. Here's a successful launch included in the list by our editor simply because it looks epic and awesome. The rocket smoothly gains cruising speed and exits Earth's atmosphere. The bright explosion at the end is the burnout of the first stage. No, this isn't a Falcon 9 with reusable first stage. The used components are destroyed in the atmosphere every time. Failure of the single-use Antares launch vehicle developed by American public company Orbital Sciences Corporation. In fact, the launch didn't even happen. The rocket exploded right on the launch pad to the amusement of onlookers. No casualties. The rocket is intended solely for delivering cargo to low Earth orbit and does not carry astronauts. Failed launch of an Atlas rocket with a Centaur upper stage in 1965. It ended in failure due to incorrect closure of the fuel valves just 1 second after ignition. The rocket exploded right on the launch pad, causing severe damage. Notably, even at that time, NASA was recording footage in color film. A disaster that occurred in May 2020, the fourth prototype of SpaceX's Starship, meant to replace the aging Falcon 9, exploded directly on the launch pad at the Boca Chica site in Texas. And it wasn't even a launch, it was a static fire test aimed at detecting defects. Well, the engineers found a defect, and not a small one. Here we go again, another failed launch of the heavy-lift Starship rocket from the Starbase launch facility in Boca Chica. The goal of the test was to check launch and landing capabilities. After gaining speed and reaching an altitude of 10 kilometers per hour, the rocket attempted a complex horizontal maneuver. One of the landing engines failed to ignite, causing the rocket to crash onto the pad and explode. The solid-fuel Kairos rocket was developed by Japanese company Space One, a joint venture of Canon Electronics and IHI Aerospace. It belongs to the light class launch vehicle category and is designed to deliver up to 250 tons of cargo to low Earth orbit. Its first launch in 2024 from the private Key spaceport failed. Just seconds after ignition of the first stage, the rocket exploded. Archival footage: a failed launch of the American unmanned medium-class Atlas Centaur rocket in 1962. After traveling a short distance, it literally broke apart mid-air. According to the investigation, the cause of the accident was a lack of proper sealing in the fuel tanks. The American liquid-fueled two-stage Titan I rocket was originally designed as an intercontinental ballistic missile intended as a backup for the SM-65 Atlas, in case it failed to meet its objectives. Initial tests began in 1959 and not all of them were successful. In 1963, after the development of the more advanced solid-fueled Minuteman ICBM, the U.S. government abandoned both the Atlas and Titan programs. In June 2024, a static fire test of the Chinese two-stage rocket Tianlong-3, developed by the company Space Pioneer, ended in an accident. During the static engine test, the test stand failed to hold the first stage, causing the rocket to go into uncontrolled flight. It crashed approximately 1.5 meters from the test site, breaking into several pieces upon impact. No injuries were reported.
To be honest, I'm speechless after witnessing it. What about you?
In 2003, a group of Japanese enthusiasts founded a private rocket company. Their main goal: to develop an affordable rocket for launching nanosatellites into orbit. Of the 4 Momo rockets built, 3 test flights ended in failure. This clip shows the failed launch of the Momo 2 rocket in 2018. In April 2023, a huge crowd gathered near one of SpaceX's test sites in Boca Chica to watch the launch of the Starship 2 rocket. The rocket gained speed confidently, but encountered a high-pressure region a few kilometers up. Unable to overcome the atmospheric resistance, several engines failed, affecting the rocket's trajectory. After tumbling in the air for a while, it broke apart. The European single-use heavy-lift rocket Ariane 5 was considered one of the best for delivering up to 20 tons of payload to low Earth orbit. It was used by the European Space Agency from 1996 to 2023. Over that period, 117 launches were conducted, 112 were successful, 2 failed, and 3 were partially unsuccessful. This clip shows the very first launch of the rocket, which took place in June 1996. A massive explosion marked the end of a Starship test flight conducted by SpaceX. The accident occurred in December 2020 during a test mission. The rocket launched successfully and reached its target altitude of 12.5 kilometers. During landing, it was discovered that there wasn't enough pressure in the fuel tanks, which prevented the engines from slowing the rocket's rapid descent properly. Another view of the failed launch of the Japanese Momo 2 rocket. Despite losses of nearly $500,000, the private Japanese company Interstellar Technologies continued rocket development, and the third Momo prototype successfully launched a payload into Earth orbit. The third prototype rocket developed by the American private company Astra Space. During a launch from the Kodiak spaceport in Alaska, the rocket immediately began behaving strangely. Instead of ascending, it veered horizontally. It failed to reach the Kármán line, the boundary between the Earth's atmosphere and space, lost communication with mission control, and broke apart. Failed launches are nothing unusual in the space industry and hardly surprise those involved. All possible risks and losses are calculated and accounted for in the budget. Morpheus is a flying vehicle developed by NASA for exploring other planets and their moons. During testing in 2012, the lander exploded right on the launch pad, never even lifting off. This led to more than 70 design changes, and subsequent tests were far more successful. The three-stage Nuri rocket was fully designed by South Korean engineers. Its first flight in October 2021 ended in failure. The third stage shut down 46 seconds earlier than planned. Although the payload reached the intended altitude of 700 kilometers, it failed to gain orbital speed.
What a twist! Haven't you expected to see this either, have you?
America's first attempt to launch an artificial satellite into orbit ended in failure. The three-stage Vanguard rocket, launched from Cape Canaveral in 1957, lost thrust right after liftoff and toppled onto the launch pad, partially destroying it. The TV-3 payload was damaged and deemed unusable. After cosmetic restoration, it was placed on display at the National Air and Space Museum. When amateurs try to implement technically complex projects, it often ends in failure. This clip shows a failed model rocket launch in a developing country. Moments after liftoff, the rocket explodes, scattering debris around the area. The Chinese Hyperbola 1 rocket made history for its creator, the private company iSpace. However, the rocket itself has reliability issues. Of the 7 launches to date, 4 have failed. This clip shows the May 2022 launch from a spaceport in the Gobi Desert in northern China. After a successful liftoff, a malfunction in the 4th stage prevented the rocket from reaching its intended orbit. Although the European Ariane 5 rocket boasts of a long list of successful launches and is considered one of the best in history of space exploration, it hasn't always been perfect. This clip shows a failed launch in October 2014. Just 14 seconds after liftoff, the fuel tanks detonated, destroying the rocket.
There are things that are absolutely impossible to believe, and how could this even happen?
A failed attempt to launch an American Intelsat 708 satellite using a Chinese rocket at the Xichang spaceport. From the very first seconds, it became clear the launch would end in disaster. The Long March 3 rocket veered sharply off course and flew toward the nearest village, where not a single home was left standing. Photos taken the next morning resembled the aftermath of a nuclear bombing. Cygnus is an American unmanned cargo spacecraft developed by private company Orbital Sciences Corporation as part of NASA's resupply program. The third launch using the Antares 130 rocket with an upgraded second stage ended in failure. Just seconds after liftoff, the rocket was destroyed by ground command at an altitude of 150 meters due to abnormal behavior of the first stage. The Rocket Festival in Thailand, or Bun Bang Phai, is an annual celebration typically held in May before the planting season. The event is organized to thank the local guardian spirit and ask for rain. The festival is considered dangerous as the launched rockets sometimes explode, occasionally resulting in casualties. HIIA is a Japanese medium-lift launch vehicle developed by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries for the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. The launch complex is located at the Tanegashima Space Center, Japan's largest spaceport. This clip shows the only failed HIIA launch in November 2003. Before this, 5 successful flights had been completed, followed by over 40 more.
And how do you like such a twist? To be honest, I can't do without your comments here.
Atlas Able was a modified American rocket intended for launching Pioneer lunar probes. It was a temporary solution during the space race between the USSR and the USA and amid internal competition between American agencies. None of its 4 launches were successful, and the program was canceled as soon as a better option became available. On October 11, 2018, the Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft was launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, carrying 1 Russian and 1 American astronaut to the ISS. At 119 seconds into flight, separation of the side boosters from the central stage caused a failure in the second stage engines. The emergency escape system activated, separating the spacecraft from the rocket. The crew capsule was later found 402 kilometers from the launch site. Thankfully, no one was injured. The Atlas Centaur AC-67 was a variant of the American launch vehicle equipped with a Centaur upper stage used for placing satellites in a geosynchronous orbit and boosting interplanetary probes. Development began in 1956 with active use starting in 1963. Centaur proved to be highly reliable and efficient and was used until 2003. It helped NASA launch numerous lunar missions and most of the Mariner probes sent to Mars. China's heavy-lift Long March 5 rocket is currently one of the most powerful in operation, surpassing Europe's Ariane 5 and Russia's Proton M, and rivaling the American Delta IV Heavy. However, the launch on July 2, 2017 failed. At 346 seconds into flight, an anomaly occurred in one of the first-stage engines. As a result, the 7-ton Shijian 18 satellite did not reach orbit. In February 2020, SpaceX faced yet another setback. The second prototype of the Starship launch vehicle, designated SN1, was destroyed during a static fire test at the Boca Chica site in Texas. The tank, filled with liquid nitrogen, could not withstand the pressure. The rocket's body lifted several dozen meters into the air before crashing down onto the launch pad. Residual fuel caused a secondary explosion. Failed test of the American Atlas intercontinental ballistic missile in 1957. Excessive vibration levels caused engine failure. The rocket veered far off its intended course, burned up in the atmosphere, and moments later the remaining fuel tanks exploded. On January 17, 1997, a Delta II launch vehicle carrying a GPS satellite exploded at the U.S. Air Force Base in Cape Canaveral. The failure occurred at the 13-second mark. It was a spectacular scene. More than 250 tons of burning debris were scattered around the launch pad. Here we see one of the participants in the previously mentioned rocket festival in Thailand. Judging by the crowd's reaction, incidents like this aren't surprising. It's just another failed launch, which happens regularly at the event. Failed launch of a Caliber missile from the frigate Marshal Shaposhnikov during exercises in the Black Sea in 2021. It was clear from the beginning that something had gone wrong. The missile veered off course, spun several times, and crashed near the ship. An epic fail considering a missile of this type costs around $300,000. This incident, previously mentioned, involved the Delta II rocket that was meant to deliver next-generation GPS satellites into orbit. Just seconds after launch, the $55 million rocket exploded, showering the area with flaming debris. This shockwave was so powerful that windows were shattered in homes miles away. Local residents had to seek immediate shelter from falling fragments.
What an incredible footage! We always strive to choose the best content for you.
VLS is a light-class launch vehicle intended to become the mainstay of the Brazilian Space Agency. In August 2003, just 2 days before its planned launch, the V3 prototype exploded on the launch pad, completely destroying it. The disaster claimed the lives of 21 people and caused a major setback for Brazil's space program. The company Virgin Galactic plans to offer suborbital tourist flights in the future using a space plane launched from a carrier aircraft. On October 31, 2014, a test ended in failure. The VSS Enterprise spaceplane broke apart mid-air, and its debris crashed in the Mojave Desert in California. One pilot died, and the other was seriously injured. Accident involving the Ukrainian Zenit 3SL launch vehicle during a launch from the Odyssey C platform in January 2007. The cause of the disaster was a foreign object that entered the turbopump assembly, leading to engine failure. The American three-stage ballistic missile Trident II is designed for launch from nuclear submarines. Since development was completed, fewer than 10 of its 215 launches have failed. This clip shows one of those rare failures. Apollo 6 was the second and final uncrewed flight of the Saturn V rocket, part of the Apollo program. It took place on April 4, 1968 and was marked by several issues, malfunctions in the second stage, and thrust reduction in one engine. Despite the setbacks, NASA deemed the flight conditions acceptable, paving the way for the first crewed missions. The Juno 2 rocket wasn't one of NASA's most reliable vehicles. This video captures perhaps its most spectacular failure, which occurred in July 1959. A guidance system malfunction caused the rocket to veer off course after launch and explode, destroying the launch pad. Another case where operators had to destroy a rocket mid-flight despite a seemingly successful launch, the Indian medium-lift GSLV rocket, intended to deliver a 2-ton communications satellite, deviated from its course. One of the boosters failed to respond to onboard computer commands. The decision was made to destroy the rocket, which exploded at an altitude of 8 kilometers.
If you haven't liked this episode yet, now is the best time to do it.
The Kairos rocket, designed by the Japanese private company Space One, is 18 meters long and weighs 23 tons. When successful, it can deliver a 250-kilogram payload to low Earth orbit. So far, there have only been 2 launch attempts, both of which failed. However, there's confidence that the Japanese team will eventually succeed in launching it successfully. Due to secrecy, military rocket failures rarely become public, but with smartphones everywhere, leaks are more frequent, and if someone captures an interesting moment, it's bound to end up online. If a mishap happens during a parade or exercise in front of onlookers, you can be sure someone will film it and post it online, like the incident with an anti-aircraft missile launched from the patrol ship Ladny in Sevastopol. And to wrap things up, a not-so-scary, more comical episode. Judging by the operator's reaction, even he was surprised by how things turned out. When the rocket was supposed to launch several GLONASS satellites. That didn't happen. At 32 seconds into the flight, the rocket veered off course and crashed a few kilometers from the launch complex. The investigation found that 3 of the 6 angular velocity sensors had been installed incorrectly. Launching rockets always carries a certain risk. There's always a chance of an accident, and even if a populated area isn't very close to the launch site, there's no guarantee that the rocket or its debris won't reach it. The disaster was caused by a malfunction in angular velocity sensors. The rocket was carrying over 600 tons of fuel, including liquid oxygen and aviation kerosene, and was supposed to deliver GLONASS navigation satellites into orbit.
We're sure that our episode has impressed you. In fact, we always strive to choose the best ones for you. And we want to thank our regular subscribers and warmly welcome new ones.